Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic. Today, we're going to try something a little different, and we're going to talk about the history of T-Rex, or maybe how we perceive T-Rex through the times.
First Tyrannosaurus rex officially described was discovered in the Hell Creek Formation in Montana in 1902 by Barnum Brown and Richard Lull. They dug out 36 bones, including a lower jaw, a femur, a few vertebrae, and the pubic bone. All of them were so massive that Henry Field Osborn, the scientist who described it and gave it its name, said, "I propose to make this animal the type of the new genus Tyrannosaurus," in reference to its size, which greatly exceeds that of any carnivorous land animal hitherto described. I'm sure he sounded just like that.
So it was Osborn's colleague, William D. Matthews, who got to be the first to ever illustrate Tyrannosaurus rex in 1905. To have that feather in your cap.
The body was very upright, almost like a kangaroo, with a tail that would drag on the ground when it walked, and tiny little legs that probably wouldn't help it run very fast. But hey, it was the first ever attempt at figuring out what they looked like based on a specimen that was only about 10% complete.
Honestly, this is the first T-Rex ever drawn, and I've seen worse, really, and much more modern. I'd say that they've done an amazing job considering what they were working with. And you can see in the illustration that they've colored in a little darker all the bones that they actually found. And that's exactly what they were working with. You know, some parts of the legs, some parts of the pubis, the jaw, an arm, and some vertebrae. So everything else is kind of extrapolation off of other things that we kind of knew about. But everything back then was gray area in terms of knowledge in paleontology. So, you know, the tail, that was all estimated. The rest of that, the hips, just a guess. But what really surprises me is that they did associate that arm with the rest of the skeleton. It must have been, you know, pretty obvious that it belonged to just one individual and that it wasn't mixed in with a bunch of other bones of other creatures. Because if it were me, I would have seen this tiny arm and assumed that it was a baby or a totally different animal's arm that got mixed in. But no, they worked out what kind of crazy anatomy this animal must have had to have tiny little arms and gigantic bones. Yeah. It's incredible.
In 1906, Osborn used other fossils for extra context, and L.M. Sterling produced an updated version of the illustration.
So the same skeleton and generally the same pose. But as you can see, this one here is a lot more detailed. He used a more traditional anatomical illustration style, and this is something that I still use in my work. And you can also see that he has scaled these bones to each other a little more carefully. So I think this was after having a year of spending a lot of time around these bones. This was more than just coloring in a general map. This was detailing what is present and, you know, what was assumed to be there for the rest of the skeleton.
But of course, these are just skeletons. What we want to see is how people imagined the muscles, the skin, and the integument that covered them. It was only 10 years later when the museum commissioned the legendary Charles Knight to paint a full version of the T-Rex based on their fossils. The result was this.
Okay, this one is a classic. Charles R. Knight. He is one of my own paleo art heroes. I mean, anyone who does this kind of thing reveres his work. T-Rex at the time was really perceived as a gargantuan reptile. And it's interesting to see what kind of current influences were used for depicting this animal. And you can actually point it out pretty easily. Some of the biggest reptiles we have today are iguanas. If you look at the way the mouth and the cheek are reconstructed in this piece, like that big cheek scale, that's an iguana. Even the way that the mouth closes, the way that there's lips on it, like scaly lips, just like an iguana. We're gonna come back to that later because the lips is a hot topic. But even the scales on the body, the color green, the stripy tail, All of that screams iguana, and this trend lasted for a long time.
It still had all the major issues of the skeleton-only illustrations, plus one little added mistake. Charles, who had been drawing other theropods, added a third finger onto the T-Rex, assuming that T-Rex would have the same number of fingers as its cousins. Logical enough to me. Despite having an incorrect number of fingers, this painting rocked the nation's socks off and was the inspiration for the 1918 film, The Ghost of Slumber Mountain, where a T-Rex fights a Triceratops.
All right, so next, we've got Dinosaurs Go to the Movies, and this is gonna be T-Rex's big debut on the silver screen. And it was silver screen back then, because this is 1918. So let's give this a little watch. It's a stop motion animation. Oh, you've got Triceratops just walking around, bumping things with their giant horns. You know, that's the classic T-Rex, dragging his tail around, lumbering about, kind of a slow, powerful predator. He looks so smug, always licking his chops. It's like my cat. This isn't important or anything, but the little like licking his chops on the side thing, probably couldn't do that. I know it's pedantic, but the hyoid bone, so that's the bone that supports the tongue, that was found in one of T-Rex's cousins, Tyrannus. And based on the studies done on that, it was indicated that they probably couldn't stick out their tongue. So it was used for internal manipulation and helping to hold on to prey and other things. And obviously shoving food down its throat. But licking its chops, probably not.
The Ghost of Slumber Mountain was a massive hit and made $100,000 in the box office on a budget of $3,000. In today's terms, that's roughly a $2 million return on a $60,000 investment. The T-Rex was the main attraction, and a star was born.
So after that movie, T-Rex managed to get a few more minor roles into some other lower budget productions. But it wasn't until 1933 that Tyrannosaurus Rex was featured on the big screen. We're talking worldwide blockbuster, 1933's King Kong. So let's watch a clip of that. So like the scales on T-Rex here, they're very detailed, and I gotta say they look almost more crocodilian than iguanodon-y. Is that a word? It is now. So, you know, the idea of T-Rex was continuing to evolve. And maybe, I think around this time we were starting to think of crocodilians as a closely related group to dinosaurs. Oh no! Oh, this is brutal. Ooh. And King Kong broke its jaw. And he's playing with it because of course he is. So for a lot of people around the world, I'd say most people, this was their first view of T-Rex. Because if they weren't keeping up with scientific publications, which wasn't easy at the time, no internet, or they couldn't go to the AMNH, then they really couldn't see T-Rex, you know? So for them, this is what imprinted on everyone's mind when you would say T-Rex. It was this big blockbuster movie. King Kong was no small production either. It cost about $600,000, but it made about $10 million in revenue, which in today's world would be about $250 million. Totally worth the investment. So who do you think would win? One T-Rex or 100 regular-sized gorillas? Let me know in the comments.
7 years later, in 1940, the bar was officially raised by no other than Walt Disney Productions.
This is Disney's Fantasia. And this film is one of my favorites, and I drove my family absolutely crazy watching this daily for probably a couple years as a kid. I was one of those. So what really sets this film apart from everything that came before is that they consulted with an actual paleontologist to advise on the look and the movement and just the whole aspect of how these dinosaurs would move and live. Well, they're so dynamic. Oh my goodness, look at these plodding long necks. Well, that's weird. So there's a bunch of animals here that like, maybe they went through a warp hole and landed all in one place to fight to the death. Because a lot of these animals did not coexist at the same time or place. One of my favorite like little facts in paleontology is that we live closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex lived to Stegosaurus. And here we have them fighting. And oh my gosh, it's so good. It's such a dynamic battle, but this never could have happened. So the T-Rex, as usual, is still green. It is also still the very ferocious predator that we've been seeing all along, but maybe even more ferocious by the fact that you see its teeth at all times. Up until now, we've been seeing the kind of iguana-style scaly lips that cover the teeth. And obviously, when he opens his jaw, then you see them. So one of the big design changes we're seeing here in this T-Rex, like yes, it's still a green tail dragger that's really upright and kind of looks like a man in a suit, but it's lipless. So we're no longer going with the iguanodon, scaly lips kind of look. This one here, you see his teeth out at all times, whether he's gnashing or roaring.
In the painting world, Rudolf Zallinger painted a mural called The Age of Reptiles for the Yale Peabody Museum.
So around the same time that Disney's Fantasia came out, there was a lot of paleo art that was starting to pop up. And sometimes the trends in reconstructing T-Rex were pretty variable. Some of them already looked antiquated by this time.
The T-Rex was included as a gigantic but seemingly slow and awkward beast. Its skin was like that of a lizard, and it seemed like it walked around with its tail on the ground.
I do love the big beefy leg. The big beefy leg, it's like big, strong, powerful. But then it's got like this big balloon gut. It's interesting. It's definitely got its charm, don't get me wrong. I love Salinger's work. And yet at the same time, along with Disney's Fantasia, Charles Knight made another painting of T-Rex. And this time, the prompt might have been, what's the coolest thing you can imagine ever happening in the history of the world? And so he painted two T-Rexes fighting. Now these T-Rexes, they are looking a little more forward-thinking. I'd say that they're following the more dynamic and less lumbering kind of idea of what a T-Rex would move like. What I find a little weird about this one, though, is the long, snaky whip tail, which we have no idea. Maybe, I can't remember, but maybe at that point we might not have had a full T-Rex tail. We have that now, but at this point in time, I'm gonna guess we didn't. So they were still using kind of the kangaroo tail, but this one's snaky.
This idea of the T-Rex stayed the same until the 70s, a period we called the Dinosaur Renaissance. A paleontologist named John Ostrom suggested that dinosaurs weren't sluggish lizards, but rather smart and fast-moving beasts, more closely related to birds than to iguanas, and that they might be social, unlike most modern reptiles. His colleague, Robert Bacher, went even further, arguing that they were warm-blooded animals. These new ideas led to a little obscure book from 1990 that was then adapted into a tiny movie called Jurassic Park.
This movie changed how we think of dinosaurs in all the ways. Not only were they, sustaining their image as being gigantic, terrifying movie monsters, but they were getting smarter and faster. All of this is kind of a reflection of a total change in how we perceive dinosaurs at the time. It's known as the Dinosaur Renaissance, where we were associating dinosaurs more closely in evolution to birds. So birds are fast, they're intelligent, they are, much more active than, say, a lizard, for example. The Jurassic Park T-Rex is also showing that the way that we think of T-Rex's teeth is starting to change as well. Because you can see that it's got kind of like a gummy flap around its mouth. So you could call them lips, you could debate that one way or another, but it's no longer exactly like the bare teeth all the way out like a crocodile anymore. So this vision of the T-Rex, it stuck around for a long time. I'd say a lot of people still think this is the standard of T-Rex. And who can blame them? It looks totally amazing.
Jurassic Park was released soon after two well-preserved specimens, Wankel and Sue, were discovered. These were the two most complete specimens found up to that point. It was such a big deal that even penguins went to see them. Later, biomechanical studies showed that this was very likely an overcorrection. The T-Rex was a big predator and mostly walked and ran with its body in a horizontal position, like a T, and it was probably not very agile.
In 1999, the BBC released Walking with Dinosaurs, the original one, I mean. And to this day, this is still what most people look to for a litmus test of is a nature documentary about dinosaurs good or not. They are all still compared to this standard. So this is showing a T-Rex who's fighting an Ankylosaurus in probably the Hell Creek Formation, because that's where they lived at the time. And so this is definitely approaching it from a more naturalistic, factual point of view, using science and sticking to it as best they could to create a narrative that would, inspire people to watch. And what this documentary was really doing differently from everything else we've shown before is that they were framing it like an actual nature documentary, trying to show it, as a real day in the life of these animals, the same way that we might depict lions on the Serengeti. Hey, kitty. Now, jumping all the way to 2023, we've got Apple TV's Prehistoric Planet 2, which is showing something that wasn't really depicted in media before. We've got a fuzzy T-Rex. Another big difference that we're seeing is that this is no longer about trying to create a movie monster to terrify people. They are terrifying in their own right as natural creatures. Showing their own proposed behavior is, in a lot of ways, more fascinating to a lot of people than something that's just, born to trample.
The debate over whether T-Rex had feathers had heated up since 1996, when a theropod called Sinosauropteryx was confirmed to have had feathers. The feathered Caudipteryx and Protoarchaeopteryx were discovered soon after, suggesting this was a common adaptation in theropods, especially among smaller species. In most dinosaurs, feathers were likely used for insulation rather than flight, and this insulation would have been particularly useful to smaller dinos who didn't have the hardware for flight. Then in 2012, Eutyrannus, a large theropod and a close but older relative of T-Rex, was discovered to have had feathers, similar to those of an emu. This added weight to the idea that T-Rex might have had feathers, at least on parts of its body or during certain stages of its life.
But by this point, it's totally valid to start exploring, what a feathered T-Rex could look like. In the past several years, there's been a lot of studies and evidence that both advocate for and against the idea of T-Rex having feathers. Now, some of that is the idea that maybe the smaller tyrannosaurids and theropods would probably have some kind of feathers, but they would lose the need for that insulation the larger they got, which is something that you see in mammals today. But dinosaurs were different beasts. Some of the evidence that we've found against the feathery T-Rex theory is that we have fossilized skin impressions of T-Rex from different parts of the body. The idea is that these scales, they wouldn't be able to occupy the same space as the structures necessary to be feathery. So those fossils hint at them being scaly, not feathery.
We still don't know whether T-Rex had feathers, but since many of its relatives did, it's considered likely that it had at least some. It's possible that they were only present during juvenile stages or limited to certain areas of the body. What we did get some closure on is the whole lip debate. We're now pretty sure that the teeth weren't exposed like those of a croc.
In 2023, a new paper came out in Science by Cullen et al. Talking about teeth development and how enamel works in teeth. both in dinosaurs and in extant animals. What was found is that T-Rex probably had lips, or at least some kind of tissue covering the teeth, because it turns out that enamel breaks down when it's exposed to air, so it needs to stay sealed in with lots of saliva. I'd like to talk about the Tyrannosaurus Rex that I got to reconstruct and paint. This is the Black Beauty T-Rex. This is a famous one here in Canada. It's a fairly complete skeleton, and it's called Black Beauty because its bones are pitch black. I got to reconstruct this for the Fukui Prefectural Dinosaur Museum in Japan, and this ended up being part of their dinosaur exhibit all about the North American Cretaceous. And it was a huge honor to do that. So they didn't want a feathery T-Rex, and that's fine and perfectly scientifically acceptable. Either way, right now we don't have enough evidence one way or another, but I'm excited to know what's gonna come next. So there's gonna be a lot of physical differences between my reconstruction and what was done in the early 1900s. For example, it was in a much more horizontal position, still very capable of rearing up and raising its head, but its body's balance was more centered around the hips, and the tail and the head would balance each other out a little bit. The tail itself is definitely not dragging. It's holding itself up nice and firm. There's a lot of muscles that run all the way down the tail. If you did like a cross section of that tail, it would be way more round than flat, like we used to see in the early 1900s. And finally, we're gonna take a look at the latest depiction of T-Rex. And that's with BBC Earth's Walking with Dinosaurs. Not the 1999 one, this is 2025. It came out last week. I haven't seen this yet. I've been saving it for this moment. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, look at all that integument all over its head. It's got some keratin patches over the eyes. Its mouth is sealed shut. I love that the first thing they show you isn't a T-Rex with his mouth wide open. Yeah, this looks like a natural animal. Yeah, and just like in my illustration, you can see that, its spine is held much more horizontal than it used to be. And even so, it doesn't look like it's going to tip over because its muscles and bones are well distributed for its weight. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm excited to see more of this. I think I'm gonna have to go binge this tonight. So I want to be upfront here that there is so much research out there on T-Rex. It might be the best known dinosaur of all time. And if you wanted to try and track all the evidence for and against things like lips or scales or feathers, you'd be bouncing around the internet from one paper to another for hours. We couldn't exactly encapsulate all of that here, so we're giving you the short notes, but we're trying to do it justice.
If horror movies have taught us anything, it's that things that rise from the dead are usually brain-hungry zombies. But not everything that's been resurrected is as it seems. These are the rare cases in which creatures that come back from the dead are actually welcomed with fanfare and open arms. These are the species that came back from apparent extinction.
Lazarus taxon are defined as species that are thought to be extinct, but then pop up either in fossil records much later or in real life, to our great surprise.
The name Lazarus species comes from a Bible story where Jesus is raising Lazarus of Bethany from the dead 4 days after his entombment. You get the connection. Usually, Lazarus species disappear and reappear in areas that are little seen by researchers. Remote islands, up in the mountains, or deep down in the oceans. Many times, these species have been extinct according to science, despite locals being well aware of their continued existence the whole time.
Let's splash right in with the most famous of all the Lazarus species, the coelacanth. Discovering a fish believed to be dead for around 66 million years in a fishing net was certainly not on anyone's bingo card in 1938. It would turn out to be one of the coolest scientific discoveries of the 20th century. And people at the time were ripe for sensation, as it had only recently been disproved that another hopeful Lazarus species was swimming around in Loch Ness. Speculation at the time was that the Loch Ness monster was in fact a plesiosaur, an ancient marine reptile like Elasmosaurus that had somehow survived.
But the disappointment of Nessie was all but forgotten with the discovery of the coelacanth, at least according to news reports at the time. The story of its discovery begins in South Africa when a trawler dredged up something he admitted he'd never seen in his 30 years of fishing. He called up Marjorie Courtney Latimer, the curator of the local Natural History Museum, who came down to his boat, the Nareen, to investigate. The fish was truly unlike anything she'd ever seen either. It was the weight of an average-sized 13-year-old, and about as long, shiny blue with flashy, robust scales, and dark blue eyes an ichthyologist could get lost in. And it had little limbs at the base of its fins. Until that point, we only knew coelacanths from the fossil record, and even then, they were kind of a big deal. That's because they are lobe-finned fishes, which means their fins are heftier than other fish, supported by muscle and bone. When they swim, they move their fins in an alternating pattern, almost like a horse trotting. Fish like the lungfish can even walk on land on their lobe fins.
That's important because tetrapods, meaning almost any four-limbed vertebrates, including humans and lions and crocodiles, evolved from another lineage of lobe-finned fish called Elpistostigalians, which included species like the Tiktaalik. Lobe-finned fish to land-lubbing animals was one of the most important transformations in vertebrate history. So, finding a real live coelacanth with its little legs was a huge sensation.
Courtney Latimer immediately called J.L.B. Smith, a professor at nearby Rhodes University. By the time he got the telegraph and arrived 2 months later, they'd already taxidermied it and thrown away all the rotten insides.
Despite the disappointment of not seeing its guts, this is what JLB had to say when he laid eyes on that stuffed fish for the first time.
Although I had come prepared, that first sight hit me like a white-hot blast and made me feel shaky and queer. My body tingled as I stood stricken to stone. Yes, there was not a shadow of a doubt. Scale by scale, bone by bone, fin by fin. It was a true coelacanth.
JLB even named it after Marjorie, calling the fish Latimeria columnae, and the coelacanth was almost immediately dubbed a living fossil.
It would be another almost 15 years until the second specimen was pulled to the surface, this time 2,000 kilometers away from the Comoro Islands. Here, the locals call them gombessa, and actually pull up a few a year. Coelacanths hang out in underwater caves during the day and come out at night to hunt small fish, squid, octopus, and cuttlefish in the twilight zone of the ocean, at around 200 to 700 meters depth, which is part of the reason why they are so hard to capture and study. Having studied them, we've learned that they actually have live births, unlike a lot of their fish brethren. These individuals are not only amazing biological discoveries from a scientific point of view, but also incredibly important individuals, possibly the most important members of their species to ever live, because they're tasked with rebuilding their population. While the coelacanth might be the most famous of the Lazarus species, there are plenty of other species that have risen from the dead. The Lord Howe Island stick insect, the heaviest flightless stick insect in the world at about the weight of a AA battery, affectionately dubbed the tree lobster or even the walking sausage, was once so abundant that they were plucked off of branches and used as easy bait for fishermen.
The Lord Howe Islands are truly a unique paradise on Earth. Formed by underwater volcanoes around 6 million years ago, the crescent-shaped 10-kilometer-long island hugs a shallow basin of pristine turquoise water. With mainland Australia 600 kilometers away, it's home to hundreds of unique endemic species, like the Lord Howe woodhen, the Lord Howe Island skink, and the Lord Howe Island marbled gecko. That was until the rats showed up.
In June 1918, a steamship carrying fruits and vegetables ran aground, unleashing a plague of black rats on the island that has permanently thrown the careful balance of the island's ecosystem out of whack. The rats caused the extinction of 5 species of birds and 13 species of invertebrates. The Lord Howe Island stick insect was thought to be one of them. That was until 2001, when scientists were determined to locate them. They hoped that the rats had never colonized the highest peak on the island, Ball's Pyramid, making it a safe haven for these tree lobsters. After a thorough search, they came up with nothing, until on their descent, when they found some oddly large poops.
They came back that night and sure enough, found a colony of 24 tree lobsters. It had been 81 years since the last sighting, and here they were, just hanging out. Since 2001, breeding programs like the one done by the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance have brought this unique bug back from the brink of extinction. The takai, a flightless swamp hen native to New Zealand, nicknamed the blue goose, was thought not once, but twice to be extinct.
There were once 2 species of takai, the North Island, which is genuinely extinct, and the South Island takai, which is still alive and clucking today, but is endangered. The first time they were declared extinct was in 1850, just 2 years after they were first described by European scientists from skeletal evidence. These birds had existed in Maori oral tradition long before their description by Western scientists, and were called moho or mohoa'u, meaning lonely. But even the Maori people didn't see them again from 1850 until 1894, so they were once more declared extinct by 1898.
In 1948, while on a hunting trip, Dr. Jeffrey Orbell, the takai's rediscoverer, heard a strange call like someone making a whistling noise by blowing across an empty .303 cartridge case, and then discovered fresh tracks. He returned to the area and was able to spot the first 2 live takai after half a century of believed extinction. As of 2023, with the help of conservation efforts and hand-rearing and reintroduction, the population of wild takai is now over 500 individuals, with the population growing 5 to 8% every year. Danielle, you want to see a takai?
Do I ever?
Here's some of those charcoal-flavored little puffs.
Let's travel now to Cuba, where a venomous, bunny-sized true relative that's been long dead everywhere else was discovered in Alexander Humboldt National Park in 1974. The Cuban Selenodon, one of 2 species, with the Hispaniolan Selenodon living on the nearby island of Hispaniola. The Cuban Selenodon has a long and storied history on Earth, tracing their mammalian line all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs, about 70 million years ago, which gives their dino-sounding name all the more cred.
First described in 1861, researchers lost track of them for almost a century towards the end of the 1800s, so they were believed to be extinct. But then, in 1974, a few were spotted to everybody's great joy. Since then, until 2016, only 11 individuals had ever been captured. Part of the reason they are so hard to study is that they are not fooled by the traps laid by researchers. Their acute sense of hearing and smell and their aversion to humans make them difficult to catch. Today, despite its status of definitely not extinct, the Cuban Selenodon is still very, very endangered. Human activities like deforestation and the introduction of animals like mongoose, stray dogs, and feral cats continue to threaten their habitat and populations.
You've probably noticed with a lot of these Lazarus species that they exist in isolated habitats on or little populated islands. That's because geographical isolation creates hyper-specialized species with very small viable habitats. One form of geographic isolation is being limited to mountainous areas, like in the case of the Lazarus species, the Peruvian yellow-tailed woolly monkey.
Even though the locals said they were still around, they hadn't been seen by scientists since the 1920s.
The Peruvian yellow-tailed woolly monkey was first described in 1812 by Alexander von Humboldt, based solely on the dense pelts of these monkeys that were used as saddle blankets by Andean horseback riders.
We know now that it lives in an extremely limited area in the cloud forest of eastern Peru. Like most other Lazarus species, it still faces an extreme threat of extinction. Another mountainous Lazarus species is the Wandiwoy tree kangaroo, which is so rare it's been dubbed one of the most poorly known animals in the world. Until 2017, it had been seen exactly once, at the time of its first description by evolutionary biologist Ernst Mayr in the remote mountain region of New Guinea, back in 1928.
Almost 90 years later, an amateur botanist from England named Michael Smith made it his mission to trek into the thick bamboo forest and find this rare tree kangaroo. The vegetation in the area is so thick that most locals never bother to venture that high up in the mountain. Snapping a photo of one of these elusive tree kangaroos proved to be hard since they perch so high in the trees and manage to hide themselves almost completely. It was on the last day of the expedition that they finally saw one, and Smith took the first ever photos of the creature.
Smith said, "All this just goes to show that you can find interesting things if you simply go and look." The general belief that there's nothing more of interest to discover is quite mistaken. That sentiment continues to be proven with Lazarus species still being discovered. At the beginning of this year, 2 species that were thought to be extinct for the last 7,000 years were discovered in New Guinea. Until 2026, we only knew the pygmy long-fingered possum and the ring-tailed glider from fossilized teeth found in the 1990s. After a 2-year-long collab between scientists and locals, the 2 marsupial species were found alive and well. They joined the ranks of the other 350 Lazarus species, like the Fernandina giant tortoise, the Caspian horse, the Bermuda petrel, the terror skink, the crested gecko, the horned marsupial frog, the Chacoan peccary, the large-billed reed warbler, the New Holland mouse, and the Laotian rock rat.
So let this be a reminder to always stop and take a look outside in nature. With so many resurrected creatures found so far, you never know what you'll discover if you look closely enough.
I'd suggest you start at your local desert island.
Today, we're taking a look at one of the most enduring dinosaur enigmas of all time, Therizinosaurus. At different times, it has been seen as a stabby turtle, a machete-wielding theropod, or as a gentle Cretaceous gardener. So who really is Therizinosaurus?
The story begins in 1948. The Academy of Sciences of the Soviet Union were conducting expeditions into the Nemegt Formation of the Gobi Desert. This is a place with wonderfully weird dinos, like the Tarbosaurus batar, the Asian version of the T-Rex, Saurolophus, the OG crested dino that the beloved Parasaurolophus is named after, the famous Gallimimus from Jurassic Park. A researcher named Evgeny Maleev took these fossils and in 1954 published an article describing a new species, Therizinosaurus.
Huh. Okay. So we weren't working with much. It looks like we had a couple of partial claws, but the rest of the body, I mean, we couldn't make any kind of inference from this. So all that they could do at this point was try and compare the shape and size of these claws to something else that's already been recorded.
Maybe a bit weirdly, or let's say creatively, Maleev looked at these claws and saw a sea turtle. He even named it Therizinosaurus cheloniformis, which basically means the turtle-like reaper lizard.
There actually isn't a ton about these claws that makes you think theropod right away. Most of the claws on theropod hands tend to be quite curved, usually for grasping onto things. But looking at this, I don't think I would have ever guessed that this was a theropod claw. Okay, so based on those comparisons that were initially made, let's take a peek at the first illustrations of a Therizinosaurus that was ever made. and this is by K.K. Fierova in 1954. I'm excited to see this. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay, this is really cool. What if sloth with big beak plus turtle shell? Like turtle body, sloth arms, and a beak. Sure, I mean, I guess turtles all have beaks. So, turtle sloth? That's a really interesting idea. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. That's fascinating. They didn't really give it a shell because, oh, who knows why? They didn't give it a shell, but they gave it like a long or wide and squat body close to the ground and has it sprawling on all fours, much like a turtle. And I guess the way that the head is illustrated is kind of turtle-y. Turtles all the way down. And it looks like I am not the only one who's fascinated by this reconstruction of an animal that has never existed, to our knowledge, because there's a more recent illustration based on that old art by an illustrator called Eric Kowalik, and I'd really like to see this. Okay. That's actually really great. I mean, this looks like it could have been a prehistoric marine or like coastal creature of some kind. Tell me this is a real fossil and I'll probably believe you, because nature is that crazy. I love that somebody really like committed themselves to this wild creature concept. Why not?
The turtley vision of Therizinosaurus was accepted, and few people outside of specialists thought about it. It became a sort of forgotten dino. Meanwhile, in the late 70s and early 80s, two new strange Mongolian dinosaurs were discovered: Spinosaurus and Erlikosaurus. And they looked like herbivores. They had teeth adapted for leaves, big guts to digest vegetation, and broad hips that didn't scream chase predator. But they also had massive claws, which I guess isn't that weird, considering we have long-clawed herbivores like sloths and armadillos today. So what did these two strange dinos have to do with Therizinosaurus?
There wasn't really any kind of comparison to be made between Spinosaurus and Therizinosaurus. Little did they know that that connection would be made a little further down. But this here, it essentially established the group of Spinosauridae. This was the first of its kind. Sorry, Spinosaurus, you got beat. Spinosaurus, more like Secondsaurus.
For that link to be made, new discoveries were needed. And luckily, a huge one was made the same year the original Jurassic Park movie came out. It was a new dino called Allosaurus. A reconstruction was made using two separate specimens, creating the most complete reconstruction of a member of this family yet.
So one of the really interesting things about this story here is that Allosaurus was discovered with a lot of its claws fossilized. So both hand claws and foot claws, and a lot of them are pretty distinctive. Like all of them kind of bear their own shape and conformations, but a few of them bore a significant resemblance to those of Therizinosaurus. And no one was really thinking of Therizinosaurus anymore because in everyone's mind, this was still the weirdo turtle that was probably digging in the beach somewhere. I mean, distantly in the past.
Allosaurus was proven to be a theropod, but also in the same family as both Spinosaurus and Therizinosaurus. That also meant that Therizinosaurus was more bird than turtle, and based on its massive claws, it was estimated to be 5 meters tall and 10 meters long.
And that is how, in the end, Therizinosaurus got to join the Spinosauridae family. However, Therizinosaurus had its own family named first, and that means it got to take the name over for the whole family. Long live the king. Goodbye, Spinosauridae, and hello, Therizinosauridae. It's a mouthful, but you get used to it.
Therizinosaurus became an overnight dino superstar, and it started showing up in books and pop culture.
Oh boy. Hold on to your butts, because this is a lot. So this is an example of some early artwork that was done of Therizinosaurus based on what we had of it, which was the very big claws and the big stocky bodies that looked both like a theropod and like a plant-eating dinosaur. And oh my goodness, like look at that spindly little neck and that big fridge of a belly. This art is really funny. The whole thing just looks really emaciated and swollen at the same time. It looks like sick E.T. Therizinosaurus got its big debut in pop culture, surprisingly not in a film or in an animation, but actually in a video game. So this was Dino Crisis. And for the sake of entertainment value, it might come as no surprise that Therizinosaurus was interpreted as a meat eater and a predator. So let's take a look at what they did with Therizinosaurus in this game. Gotta love those 1999 3D graphics. Feels like home. Oh no! So, of course everything's polygons because this is PlayStation in 1999. But it's got 3 gigantic claws on its hand, with actually giving it like a really robust looking body. But they made it very much like a horror movie monster kind of deal. Oh wow, look at that, hang on. If you pause there, it shows that it's got this big crest on its head, kind of like a Monolophosaurus or something. And of course, there's no evidence for that, but why not jazz them up? It's a video game, and it's pure fiction anyway. Should I do a Let's Play of Dino Crisis? I think that could be fun. I'm sorry if I just like dunk on dinosaurs the whole time. Trust me, it's out of love. This does look like a great game though. Looks fun.
On the science side of things, in 2002, one of the main remaining questions was answered. Did Therizinosaurus have feathers like other theropods? The answer was yes. A fossil of Palaeontology with feather impressions was discovered. But it would be a while until pop culture depictions caught up with the science.
Therizinosaurus got yet another glow up in 2002 in BBC's Chased by Dinosaurs. So let's watch a clip of that. This was the first time that it was featured in a documentary. And of course it was a Walking with Dinosaurs special. I mean, so good. This is just the Edward Scissorhands of dinosaurs. Can they hug though? That's what I gotta know. Can they hug? All right. Fantastic. I really like the model. It looks like a well-balanced animal, strangely enough. Though, I'm still not quite over the super thin neck and really big rotund body. But hey, herbivores are weird sometimes, or we all are sometimes. So let's skip to 2009. Therizinosaurus was starting to be seen in a slightly different light, at least compared to the face-slatching T-Rex killer that we just saw. Thoughts on it using its claws as blades and as a weapon to defend itself started to change. It's browsing from high up in a tree. You can see they didn't quite have the Walking with Dinosaurs budget, but you know, it looks decent. Although those hands look pretty darn creepy. They've got the folded wrist thing going on, and it's just not something dinosaurs could do. Okay, well, I take back what I was saying earlier about this being depicted as a peaceful herbivore, because the cutest little baby dinosaur just got impaled and eaten. Listen, I understand the whole circle of life and everything, but like, that's some Freddy Krueger shit. Carrying on with a little more paleo fantasy, we've got 2012's The Dino King. So let's watch a clip of that. Oh, he's eating rocks, as one does. It's or gastroliths. Helps you digest. Why is he so huge? Look how muscular he is. Oh no. Oh my god, look at that face. What is that face? It looks like kind of mammalian, but it's got like a mammal nose. Like the Rock's arms. Oh my god, he just wants to give a hug. And now he's chasing a whole group of tarbosaurs. Real Chad Therizinosaurus over here. Can't handle this. Yeah, it's straight up got just like a man's chest and clavicles and shoulders. This is amazing. Maybe they were using mocap, like a mocap suit, to capture his movements and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised. Wait, that Therizinosaurus? So muscly. That's all I got. Sorry, it's not very good. Wait. Sorry, I gotta. Only 3 fingers. So the next one we're gonna look at is from 2015, and this one's from a kids show called Dino Dan. And what's cool about this is that in Dino Dan, they go the extra mile and depict it with feathers, because by this point, we knew it had feathers. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at this fuzzy guy. So yeah, even this kids show was choosing to educate people properly with the current knowledge that we had. And this is a really beautiful depiction. It's gorgeous. It looks bird-like, as a theropod should, to at least some extent. And it looks very much like its own thing. Definitely doesn't look like the Rock. So a lot of the physical features that we've been compiling over the years for all of Therizinosauridae, and especially for Therizinosaurus, it's all present here. They did a marvelous job of trying to really bring this creature to life based on everything that we've learned about it. You know, it's got that short and stocky spine, that tail as well. It's got the 4 toes that contact the ground. It's got the narrow jaws. It's got the big wide belly. It's really got all the parts, and somehow it does look like a real animal. It's believable to me. Oh wow, so towards the end of this episode, they've got a nest in the kid's backyard, and the female is kind of tending to the nest and sitting on the eggs, and the male is taking it upon himself to bring her food. Oh, I think that's wonderful. And at this point, we actually knew that Therizinosaurs and Oviraptorosaurs were sister groups, or at least closely related in the Theropoda family. And so by this point, we actually had fossil evidence of nests and nesting behavior for Oviraptor dinosaurs. And what's kind of cool is that they're borrowing that whole concept and saying, well, if its closest relatives in Theropoda were doing it, why not Therizinosaurs? That's cool. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the Dino Dan series. I think that they're a fantastic educational show, and they're fun, so much fun. So let's move on to 2022 and take a visit to everyone's favorite place to look at bad dino science, Jurassic World Dominion. Of course, they're making it like hyper aggressive because he really wants to eat his little leaves. So by this point, there have been studies that have been published on the brains of Therizinosaurs, and they found out that they had giant olfactory bulbs in their brain. Their brains themselves, kind of small, wasn't a whole lot of room up there, but a huge percentage of their brain was the olfactory bulb, and the sense that determines is the scent. So this isn't too crazy to think of. You know, it could probably smell around for the food that it wanted and judge its environment using its sense of smell, thanks to those big olfactory bulbs. And big olfactory bulbs just happen to be a pretty key feature among herbivores. So I'd say that's a pretty good point in Team Herbivore. And finally, a little bit later in the same year, we get Prehistoric Planet. So let's take a look at how a top-ranking studio would do this. Oh wow, and under the stars, among the trees, with that shaggy coat and slight iridescence. I really think that that's masterful. Oh wow. Interesting. So forget about giraffe, forget about sloth. We have entered the black bear of the Cretaceous. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I guess such big, strong, robust claws could be used to break open dead trees and logs and access things like, you know, insect nests and hives, and why not honey? Bees existed, and so did flowers. I think they're fascinating and definitely one of the biggest oddballs that we have ever discovered. And we're not done. Like, this is not the end. So let's see how much more we can learn about this entire family of dinosaurs. And if you're interested in them, I don't know, do a thesis. So there's lots more to find. I can promise you that. And another thing that's crazy is that we still don't have the skull of Therizinosaurus. We've found skulls of close relatives of Therizinosaurus, but not of this specific species. So, I don't know, get into paleontology. Go dig dinos, legally, with a group.
What is the last thing you'd expect to trip over in one of the driest places on Earth? How about the bones of possibly the largest whale to ever exist? Early estimates put it at close to 20 meters long and weighing 340 tons. And when I say big, I mean textbook example of gigantism kind of whale bone. That's exactly what happened to researchers in the Ica Desert back in 2013. And this wasn't just any big ol' whale. This species blew our understanding of gigantism completely out of the literal and figurative water, at least for a little while. This is Perucetus colossus. Today we're talking about the Perucetus, a relatively newly discovered giant whale that has been confusing the heck out of paleontologists since they first laid eyes on it. So let's start from the calm before the storm. Peruvian paleontologist Mario Urbina was surveying a rock at the Ica Desert in Peru when he found these very strange fossils. Some scientists even believed that they were likely just weird rocks. The fossils were dated to be from the late Eocene, a time with few true giants, which made things even more confusing. Each of these rocks was over 100 kilograms, which meant that if they were bones, they would belong to an absolutely massive animal. But after years of working on them, chemical analyses showed that they were ancient bones. These massive boulders were vertebrae. And there was a giant buried under the rock-hard soil of the desert. It took the team 10 years to unearth all the fossils. The final haul was 13 vertebrae, 4 ribs, and a partial hip bone. The small hip bone and the club-shaped ribs resembled those of Basilosaurus, another giant whale of its time. This was a brand new species. These bones were 3.5 times heavier than the next biggest whale that had ever been found from that time period. So this was a puzzle, with pieces that wouldn't fit in any other puzzle ever solved. And the paleontologist only had 18 of the roughly 200 bones of this whale. Most importantly, they didn't have a skull, so they weren't even sure what kind of whale it was. But they did have a point of comparison, Syntheocetus peruvianus. This was another whale from the same period, and it had similar bones to Perucetus. The team used Syntheocetus as a model to see what a full-sized Perucetus could weigh, and found that the skeleton alone could be between 5.3 to 7.6 tons. That's about 3 times heavier than a blue whale's skeleton. The math also showed that Perucetus was around 20 meters in length, or about the length of 2 large school buses parked end to end. That's not quite as long as today's blue whales, so while Perucetus didn't win in the length contest, the bones implied that it might just be fighting in the wrong weight category. The team knew that modern whales have about 45 times as much flesh, fat, and organ mass than bone mass. This meant that this whale could weigh up to 340 tons, almost twice that of the blue whale, which currently still holds the title for heaviest ever animal. A big reason for this insanely huge size estimate was that they had super dense bones. They showed evidence of osteosclerosis, which means that the usually porous spaces inside were filled with solid bone. The bone was so hard, in fact, that one of the scientists studying the vertebrae said that it broke the drill on the first attempt to bore inside of it. For a brief little while, we had this vision of a sausage-shaped whale that broke all the rules of biology. Gigantic girth, extremely thick bones, and a tiny little head that somehow would consume enough food to keep up the metabolic needs of a beast this size. And this is where Perucetus gets really interesting, because the story didn't end with the headline. The first estimate made it sound like the blue whale had been dethroned, but the only thing paleontologists actually had were a handful of bones. And they were missing the skull, the tail, the limbs, and despite having vertebrae, they didn't know what the full spine looked like. All the calculations depended on how we imagined the missing parts looked like. But in biology, rules can't really ever be broken, and new teams of researchers found a few problems with the initial calculations. First of all, they pointed out that the ratio of skeleton to soft tissue doesn't stay the same as animals grow. More conservative ratios downsized the whale by over 100 tons. Other animals with super thick bones, like manatees, have a much lower ratio of soft tissue than whales. So, using their new 3D models, they calculated that it would weigh about 65 tons if it was 17 meters long, or about 100 tons if it actually grew to 20 meters. Still a giant, but not as heavy or as long as a blue whale. This might seem like just normal science squabbling, but shots were officially fired when one of the researchers went as far as saying that these estimates would make Perucetus impossibly dense. I don't know what he sounds like. If you spent any time learning about extinct animals, you'll know that paleontologists love to roast each other publicly. As we mentioned earlier, manatees and their cousins, the dugongs, have these kinds of bones. Sirenians have evolved such dense bones to counteract the natural buoyancy of all that blubber and keep them underwater close to the sea floor to feed on aquatic plants. Perucetus likely had a similar lifestyle, except it was almost surely a carnivore, because as far as we know, there hasn't been a single vegetarian whale in the whole history of cetaceans. Then in 2025, another heavy blow to the former heavyweight champion. The ancient whale that was used to find its size was argued to be wrong. Ay, Perucetus can't catch a break, eh? Instead of using Syntheocetus, researchers argued that they were closer to Pachycetus. That meant that they had fewer vertebrae, meaning that they were shorter than they originally thought, and their skeletal weight was reassessed to be about 6 tons. They also argued that calculations based on side views overestimate mass, so they also used top-down calculations to come up with their new weight estimate, about 40 tons. That's it. They wouldn't even crack the top 5 heaviest whales alive today. The blue whale, the fin whale, the bowhead whale, and the 3 species of right whale all weigh over 50 tons. So our friend the Perucetus is no longer a giant among giants. What they are, though, is the platonic ideal of being big-boned. Even at 6 tons, their skeleton is 2 to 3 times heavier than a blue whale's. so there's still a lot to marvel about this enigmatic chubster. For example, outside of arguing about their weight, what were they like? Shouldn't we be asking the important questions? Back in the Eocene, when Perucetus was bobbing around, the Ica Desert where it was found was a shallow marine environment. The buoyancy control that it would have achieved with these dense bones would have likely helped it feed in shallow coastal waters, just like a manatee. Unlike a manatee though, Perucetus was likely carnivorous, like all other whales that we know of. But since we don't have a skull, we can only speculate about what it ate and how. Some researchers suggest that Perucetus ate bottom-dwelling animals and coastal fish, or that it scavenged on carcasses. Or it could have chased prey like giant squid and sharks, just like modern-day sperm whales, and likely Basilosaurus. But the fact of the matter is, we simply don't know, and we'll never know for sure until we find a skull. Whatever it ate, it would have had to eat a lot to maintain that huge body size, considering that a blue whale can pack away 16 tons of krill per day. That's on average about 1 million calories on the daily for the blue whale to maintain its round and perfect figure. On a general note, it's easy to understand why the expectations of Perucetus would be so high. The Peruvian desert was awash with the fossils of highly fascinating and record-setting creatures, like the freaky walrus-looking dolphin Odobenocetops peruvianus, or Inkiyaku paracasensis, a giant Eocene penguin species which was just slightly shorter than me, and Thalassocnus natans, the only known marine sloth to have ever lived. In one fossil-rich region of Peru alone, called Cerro Colorado, over 300 fossilized marine vertebrates have been found, with over 80% of them belonging to cetaceans. So Perucetus had some big shoes to fill. Even before the discovery of Perucetus, there were a couple of super famous whales found in the Peruvian desert. One extinct sperm whale, which we've already covered in detail in another video, was called Leviathan melvillei, and it was about the size of a regular sperm whale. The big difference here is that it had the largest non-tusk teeth ever discovered. Like, ever. Teeth as long as a carving knife and just as deadly. Then there was Paragocetus pacificus, the 43-million-year-old whale ancestor that still had 4 limbs and webbed feet. It was dubbed the walking whale, and it was capable of leading a double life on land and in the water. It definitely didn't look like a whale, but more like a beaver or an otter. Whales are incredible examples of evolution that we can see with every newly discovered specimen. But that's why Perucetus, while not setting any records other than heaviest mammalian skeleton, is so important. Its discovery proves to us that whales started evolving into the giants we know today a lot longer ago than we initially thought. Until unearthing Perucetus, we believed that whales started evolving into their gigantic selves within the last 5 to 7 million years. And here is Perucetus, 39 million years ago, blowing that out of the water and making us question everything we thought we knew about whale evolution. It also gave us a new type of whale, one built like a tank, shaped like a manatee, and with the face of an ancient whale back when their heads resembled land predators a bit more. TBD on when we find a skull, though. What other fossil giants are there sleeping under rocks, just waiting for a keen eye to notice that their bones are more than just rocks? In the case of Perucetus, until we have a full skeleton, we may never have a complete understanding of the implications of this massive species on whale evolution as a whole. All the more reason to keep exploring the bountiful Peruvian deserts for the next big discovery. Today, we're going to talk about a creature that's taken on so many different forms and probably has many more to go. That's right, we're going to talk about T-Rex's nemesis, Spinosaurus. Just a heads up, this creature has a long and tangled scientific history, and this is just a short version of that and how it's been depicted. So if you need more specifics about the science, definitely dig in. And check out our episode on Spinosaurus while you're at it.
So let's take a look at the very first fossils of Spinosaurus that were ever found. These were from 1912 and discovered by Richard Markgraf. So the bones that were found, by no means was this a complete skeleton, but it did seem like they all went together. But these were the weirdest fossils of a theropod dinosaur that anyone had found so far.
In 1915, Ernst Stromer published these fossils. It had a super long, narrow jaw and long protruding dorsal spines down its back. Hence, Spinosaurus. Despite being in pieces, it was so weird that it deserved to become the founding member of its very own new clade, the Spinosauridae.
I'm gonna guess that the only way that they knew that it was theropod was because of the association of other bones that it was with. Even the teeth that you can see in this illustration, they're so conical and round and robust that they look a whole lot more like a crocodilian than a dinosaur. And we'll be coming back to that later. And then we have this photograph of the vertebrae that were collected, and they put them in, you know, what they assumed would be the best plausible order. And you can see just how crazy tall those dorsal spines are, hence the name Spinosaurus. He's one spiny boy.
In 1936, Stromer made a reconstruction of Spinosaurus, trying to make sense of all the bones that were ever collected so far. It leaned pretty conservative because other large theropods were all we had to go by at the time.
So at this point, we still didn't have a face, but we knew it had a long, strong chin, some conical, pointy teeth, and it was a tall-spined theropod. But we all started to wonder the important questions, like, could it win in a fight against T-Rex?
These bones were utterly lost to history during World War II, when the museum where they were stored was destroyed. Photographs were rediscovered in the 1990s and published in 2006, and during that time, imaginations and paleontologists ran wild.
Okay, we're gonna jump all the way to 1976 because no one's really cared yet about Spinosaurus. For some reason, it's popping back up, and Giovanni Caselli decided to make this fantastic illustration. This looks like a wiener dog on steroids, and please tell me, where's the lie? So it's already going pretty wild with speculation here, and I love it. I think it's great. The text here on the page is talking about how the sale might have actually helped Spinosaurus lose excess heat and prevent it from overheating, making it a quicker theropod than other, meat eaters at the time.
Considering what they were working with, these illustrations are awesome. They're time capsules. Some of these definitely look more like Dimetrodon, while others don't bother with a sail at all and opt for big protruding spikes. Others, yet again, follow the science published and do a wonderful interpretation of it. Remember that we still only had the Stromer files and some related dinosaurs to go by.
By 1984, researchers were already proposing that Spinosaurus could have had a more croc-like snout to catch fish. And all of that was confirmed when Baryonyx walkeri was discovered.
This is when we found that the Spino family was bigger than we ever knew. The Baryonyx was pieced together from separate fossils discovered in multiple places. Even though it wasn't identical to Spinosaurus, it shared some very important traits. It doubled down on the whole fish-eating thing. The reconstruction was also more complete than what we had of Spinosaurus. It had more parts of the rest of the body and some kinda average-sized dorsal spines. Lots of the skull was discovered, including the little crest up on its forehead. It gave us a glimpse at the true face of Spinosaurus, and began painting a whole family portrait.
I love this Baryonyx paper because it's one of the few scientific research papers that gets a full reconstruction inside the paper itself, and not just, as a cover page or something. So one of the figures is this fantastic painting by John Sibbick. And I love his art, big time fan and big inspiration. He's got this animal looking so naturalistic, and honestly, it still holds up really well to what we understand Spinosaurids to be. And that's just it. This was the beginning of the expansion of the Spinosaurid family. So Spinosaurus is no longer living inside its own family all alone. It's got company. I still think that this John Civic piece is still one of the best pieces of Spinosaurid art out there. It's honestly just gorgeous. Additional evidence was found when Suchomimus was discovered in Niger. The 1998 documentary Colossal Claw gave us a better glimpse into what scientists were thinking at the time.
This skeleton of Suchomimus, or the croc mimic, was 2/3 complete. And as its name suggests, it had a very croc-like face. So at this point, people were starting to connect the dots. Maybe Spinosaurus also looked just as crocky? Considering the semi-aquatic lifestyle of crocs, was this a case of convergent evolution? And just like Spino, it had long dorsal spines too. The environment it came from was a lush, swampy delta, so there would have been lots of feeding opportunities, both terrestrial and aquatic.
Oh my goodness, that dramatic zoom. That jaw just goes on for days. Oh, I love that extreme wide-angle lens. This is really starting to take shape for what we understand Spinosaurids to look like now, today. You saw the placement of its nostril, it's higher up on the nose. Just 3 years later, Spino gets his first big break on the silver screen as the main antagonist for Jurassic Park 3. He's here to ruin T-Rex's day and is destined to fight him forever. Although they probably never would have crossed paths in reality. Okay, here comes Spinosaurus. See, this is awesome because even if at this point we didn't have everything that we now know about Spinosaurus, this was perfect timing to put him in a movie because we just got Baryonyx and Suchomimus giving us a face. So now we've got this big spiny meanie with that big croc face. I mean, they did a very nice job, actually. We didn't know yet just how tiny their legs were. So the fact that it was this big upright theropod, you know, running with those big long legs, might not hold up today, but I still think that it was a fantastic model. I think that movie gets a lot of hate. Just admit it, you wanted to see T-Rex fight a Spinosaurus. Good job, the movies. Finally, after nearly 100 years of mystery, Spinosaurus's face was finally revealed.
Check out the skeletal reconstruction though. Those legs are looking pretty long still. Something is holding this creature back from its full potential. We just don't know what yet. This is also around the time that old photos of the destroyed specimen were rediscovered in old collections. So everyone got a fresh reminder of where this all began.
So you can see here how this has been cobbled together by the bones of multiple Spinosaurus specimens and Spinosaurus cousins, because they're all like little missing pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. But together, they make a lot of sense in relation to one another. So now we've got the jaw, we've got the snout, we've got the little crest on top. The sail is nice and round and crescent-shaped, just like in Jurassic Park 3, which surely was referring to this. And it's important to remember that all of those spines, sail spines, they're all broken. Every single one of them. None of them that we have are complete. So the order in which they're arranged and the degree to which they get reconstructed is going to change our interpretation. And it will keep changing it. Just wait. Just a year later, in 2006, all of the research gets compiled into an amazing documentary. Land Before Time 12, The Great Day of the Flyers. And if you've seen this movie, then please just know you are one of the real ones. Okay, I grew up on Land Before Time. It's definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. Drove my family insane watching it day after day after day. I am who I am. But even I didn't know that these went up to 12. In fact, like, how many more are there? I'm gonna look that up later, for sure. Oh, wow. Oh, this Spinosaurus is a bit of a chunker. They definitely made them pretty wide and rotund, but they're all basketball shaped. So the sail on the back is actually kind of interesting because it looks more like an accordion fan. I've got one of those for hot days. Just fan yourself with a Spinosaurus. So we just had to go and check this because it's very vital information. There are 14 movies and 26 episodes of a series for Land Before Time. So we've got like 40 things to go and watch. Should we start a podcast watch along? Does that sound fun? I think that sounds great. Let's do it. Yeah. On a slightly more serious note, in 2011, we got BBC's Planet Dinosaur, showing us something that very likely did happen. Spinos fishing. Ooh, looks like they're eating some small theropod. Oh, and Spinosaurus is coming in for the steel. Yeah, so they're kind of pointing out that this spine was probably a bit of a weak point in terms of facing off with other theropods. It's like a big Ruffles chip. Yeah, that looks ketchup flavor. And it's interesting, you see it like moving and walking around. So every time its spine moves, you see it kind of bounce and expand and then contract. And so I don't know like how fixed and stable its spine was. It's plausible. But up to this point, I don't think we've seen underwater Spinosaurus yet. One of the really cool fish from the Chem beds where Spinosaurus is from is called Prerucetus, and it's almost always the meal of choice that Spino goes for in the water, probably because these big skate sharks are really interesting. You know, there's sawfish and all kinds of other interesting things in there too. So we've got Fisherman Spino, the pescatarian dino.
In 2014, Dr. Nizar Ibrahim and his team published the breakthrough that everyone was dreaming of. The first Spinosaurus skeleton since Stromer in 1915. What's more is that it revealed more of the anatomy that the old destroyed skeleton was lacking. It had a few of the vertebrae with the long sail bones, forelimbs, a pelvis, a hind limb, and even some parts of the skull. These new fossils, combined with new technology, gave us the opportunity to look inside the bones. Aquatic or semi-aquatic animals often evolve a higher bone density. Theropods usually have light, airy bones, but Spino bones were dense. Their legs were short, and their wide feet had long, strong bones, letting it walk on muddy, silty soil like a huge shorebird. Short legs made him a short king. The teeth were conical and thick, like a crocodile. This all pointed at a lifestyle that was closer to that of a croc than to a T-Rex, a truly massive crocodino. This made Spinosaurus a star.
Based on these discoveries, Nova released a documentary called Bigger Than T-Rex. Let's take a look at what they did. Oh, now look at that sail. That's very different already, isn't it? Kind of the M-shaped, which actually goes all the way back to Stromer and the way that he interpreted the order of those vertebrae. Wow. So as we can see now, the whole stature and like the way that this animal holds itself is suddenly so different because its whole long sausagey body is way closer to the ground because it doesn't have really long legs. In fact, they were pretty short and stout, which also means that its arms were closer to the ground as well. So they were suggesting that maybe it was able to crawl on those big claws. This documentary was a really big deal at the time. You know, it's unveiling the only individual left of Spinosaurus in terms of like an actual skeleton. And for the first time since the original skeleton was destroyed, we have Spinosaurus to work with again, with all kinds of new stuff. This also got Spinosaurus on the cover of Nat Geo. So the cover and the press release was all done by a good friend and colleague of mine in paleo art named Davide Bonadonna. And he's an incredibly skilled artist who works very closely with the researchers and takes part in it himself. Really, the artwork that he did is outstanding and so detailed and so lifelike. This artwork of Spinosaurus, it really is quite wild, because we've never seen such a short-legged theropod dinosaur. And every time someone says theropod, you're thinking, tall, upright, bipedal. Around this time, we were starting to really understand that, being bipedal doesn't mean that you're totally upright. So it was maintaining its horizontal body plan, but this time it was closer to the ground. So they're really moving into the direction of presenting this animal as being semi-aquatic. It probably spent a fair bit of its time in the water, and maybe that's part of what facilitated its short-legged life. Gets you closer to the water, maybe it makes you a better swimmer.
2017, Doctors Hone and Holtz write a paper trying to make heads and tails of all the Spinosauridae specimens collected, doing everyone a big favor by organizing all this information for referral down the line in this tangled Spinoverse. They point out that one of the features of Spinosaurids are their massive claws, and they featured this awesome bit of art by Matt von Ruyen, proposing the claws were for a "come at me, bro" free hugs threat display. Kinda like a croc-faced water anteater.
In 2018, Dr. Don Henderson decided to test the semi-aquatic hypothesis and created a digital model to see if he could make Spino buoyant in its current form. Let's see what he did. I love these figures of these submerged dinosaurs. Just trying to show, would they float? This paper really suggests that Spinosaurus was a disaster in the water, that if it wasn't constantly moving forward, then it would roll and tip over and wouldn't be able to hold itself up. It also says that even if it exhaled all the air from its lungs, it would still be too buoyant to sink or go underwater. Too many air sacs. In 2020, the plot thickens yet again, because Dr. Ibrahim is back with more Spinosaurus. And this time, he and his team are suggesting that it's the first fully aquatic dinosaur. Let's see what they have. There's actually so much to cover scientifically in this paper, but let's keep it a little short by saying this is Spinosaurus expansion pack. They found more of the Spinosaurus that they published on in 2014. And through extreme serendipity, we're able to recover it from a market and from these fossil sellers and reunite it from the original specimen. It's pretty incredible. And one of my favorite figures from this paper is, of course, the skeletal reconstruction, where we have this wonderfully lifelike and absolutely alien-looking dinosaur. But look at this swimming motion. Look at that tail. So the sail didn't end on its back. Its whole tail also had a sail, kind of like a fluke. So that's how they interpreted it. And this paper was suggesting that it used its tail as a propulsion mechanism to be able to pursue things in the water, to hunt down. With a reconstruction like this, this looks like a water living animal. Oh, it's fascinating. I'm sure it could fit some pretty big fish in that gullet, Yeah, he could fit that whole scuba diver in his gullet. He fit so many scuba divers in this baby.
Their theory was based on three main ideas. 1. On land, it would have walked on four legs and on its knuckles. Its center of gravity would have been too forward, which would have made it slow and awkward. 2. The tail was shaped like a fin, and it likely helped it propel Spinosaurus when hunting and foraging. And 3. The fossils were all found in coastal or marine environments.
This was further supported by the discovery of a nearly complete tail. So of course, they called upon their buddy Davide Bonadonna once again to make a stunning piece of art. So now we've got a literal Spinosaurus swimsuit edition, and it's a full feature. Like, look at this amazing creature in all of these action poses, hunting all kinds of different fish from its ecosystem. So this piece of art is fantastic. In fact, yeah, look at the sail on the tail. You can tell that it's kind of pushing itself along, and he's going for that Onchopristice because it's always Onchopristice, isn't it? They're pretty cool. Welcome to Spinosaurus Swimsuit Edition, where on the centerfold is a beautiful fold-out featuring full exposed cloaca. Oh, these are so beautiful. I love the colors, the light, the proportions on the animal. I mean, yeah, every one of these poses is a masterpiece. Davide, you've done it again.
The paper even included video of their experiment to see how the tail would move in a water flume. I'd say that's got a pretty nice undulation. Of course, the controversy didn't stop there. Dr. Hone and Dr. Holtz determined that the tail was too weak and the sail was too big for it to be an aquatic pursuit hunter. So they were more likely to be for display, like a peacock tail. Oh look, another different sail interpretation. Funky.
In 2022, Paul Serino and his crew created a fully posable digital model based on CT scan data of Spinosaurus specimens. And this had a full distribution of body mass with muscle, bone, and air sacs. It looked like this. Oh, wow. So yeah, they've actually modeled out different types of materials. So we have the full skeleton in 3D and the soft tissue modeled over and around that, and even some of the muscles inside the body. And each element of this model has been assigned its own mass, its own weight, its own volume, and all of that together, they're able to make slightly more accurate readings or estimates of body mass and size and weight.
The results challenged the three arguments made for the fully aquatic lifestyle. They suggested that it was a stable bipedal animal and too buoyant to swim and dive in deep water. Spinosaurus was probably a land ambush predator and was only semi-aquatic at best.
In 2025, Spinosaurus made another appearance in Walking with Dinosaurs. The new one. Oh, I mean, how often do you get to see Spinosaurus snoozing in the sun, chasing bugs? Oh, wait a sec. So they are really reflecting the current thoughts on Spinosaurus, and they were definitely working quite closely with the researchers who are most involved with Spinosaurus at this point in time. This one's going for a deep dive. And it's going, of course, for poor little... You can kind of compare this bimodal lifestyle to a lot of animals today. Like polar bears, for example. They'll dive in, chase after seals, and catch them if they can. If they spot one from the edge of an ice floe, they're gonna dive in for it. But at the same time, if they see prey on land, they're gonna go for that as well. Also, in 2025, we get Jurassic World Rebirth. In the preview of this movie, you get to glimpse at Spinosaurus, because of course they bring him back. Or several of them? And they're sticking to the aquatic theory. Well, these ones are definitely going for like the speedboat model. You can tell they're fast because they have racing stripes. But I don't make the rules. It's how it is. They're even showing that they work together to coordinate an attack. Now, I don't mean to take the wind out of these Spinosaurus' sails, but you know, this isn't necessarily the best looking interpretation of Spinosaurus that we've seen here today, but nonetheless, I love their movement. I love how they look like powerful speedboat swimmers. Still, super cool movie monster. It's what you get. I am gonna point out though that I thought we all agreed that we weren't going for the super fast swimmer style anymore. Like, you're a little behind. There's been so much interpretation of Spinosaurus and the specimens we've got of it. And you know what? I'm glad we don't know what Spinosaurus looked like for sure. It's fun that we get to keep unveiling little piece by little piece, unraveling this mystery, and even rethinking old concepts that we used to have. It keeps everyone wondering, what if? For over 100 years, Spinosaurus has kept us guessing and fighting over what we think it must have looked like. So, who do you think would win? T-Rex or Spinosaurus? Or this 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 Spinosaurus? So, what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments. And make sure you stick around till the end to see some of my favorite speculative biology reconstructions of Spinosaurus.
Two childhood fascinations, dinosaurs and mummies, collide in one of the rarest fossils ever discovered. Dinosaur mummies. Now, you may be thinking of a T-Rex wrapped in linen cloth surrounded by gold in a pyramid. But dinosaur mummies are not like typical mummies. Replace linen with its own skin, gold with sediments, and a pyramid with rock. We're going to show you some of the best preserved dinosaur fossils ever found and explain how they've helped us understand what dinosaurs truly looked like. Usually, fossilization only preserves the tough stuff. Bones, teeth, and shells get buried and slowly replaced with minerals, leaving behind a stone copy. But dinosaur mummies break the rules. These fossils have soft tissues preserved, so things like skin, scales, and sometimes even internal organs survived against the odds. Meet AMNH 5060, named the AMNH mummy, the first dinosaur mummy ever discovered. It's an Edmontosaurus, one of my favorite duck-billed dinosaurs that roamed the Earth 73 million years ago. When scientists uncovered it, they found the dinosaur lying on its back, forelimbs stretched wide, and its neck twisted upwards, like it had struggled, taken a final breath, and then sat still. To any other dinosaurs nearby, it may have looked like one of their own had simply laid down for a nap and never gotten back up. Its bones were still fully connected, preserving the exact position of its body in its final moments. Let's take a look. Edmontosaurus, such a classic duck-billed dinosaur. It's a name that's probably like the first duck-billed dinosaur that you'll hear of is going to be Edmontosaurus because we have so many specimens collected and it's been part of the literature for a long, long time. But somehow, this considered standard duck-billed dinosaur keeps on throwing more and more curveballs, and I love it for that, I really do. So we have this incredible mummy called the AMNH 5060, and it is a mummy in the true sense of the word. It's got skin just preserved all over its body from different areas, which is really interesting. I'm looking around at the photos right now from the original publication, and they did such a lovely job of tracing out all of the little tubercles, so every little scale piece individually. And it kind of helps you pick up an idea of, you know, how its skin could have looked laid out on different parts of its body. Because this clearly indicates that, you know, those scale tubercles were not the same size all over. So there's new research coming out based on this specimen constantly. Well, constantly. Every couple of years, let's say. And one of the most interesting recent things to come from it was talking about the skin frill that's going down its back. And that's really cool because we didn't really know that Edmontosaurus had this. It's got these different shaped scales that are kind of imbricated A little bit like other duck-billed dinosaurs that maybe we'll talk about later. But yeah, seeing its entire body preserved like this and getting a glimpse at the external anatomy of every part of its body, that's an absolute treasure. Edmontosaurus, nothing standard about ya. All of these details give us clues about the precise conditions needed for such a fossil to exist. Paleontologists think that the AMNH mummy possibly died during a drought, maybe due to starvation. The shrunken skin wrapped tightly around its bones is something we still see in today's animals, like lizards that die of starvation during droughts. Under intense heat, the AMNH mummy's body dried out fast, leaving behind a jerky-like vacuum seal around its body. Something else about the AMNH mummy that tells us how it died was that there were no signs of scavenging. Nobody ate it. This is unusual for such a large carcass, unless the environment itself was unusual. In extreme drought conditions, there may have been so many carcasses that scavengers literally couldn't keep up, allowing the AMNH mummy to dry up undisturbed and eventually become one of the best preserved dinosaur mummies ever found. But how does a mummy become a fossil? For fossilization to happen, a body has to be buried, usually by sediment carried in by rushing water. Without that protection, microbes, scavengers, and the elements would quickly tear it apart. So, in the case of the AMNH mummy, scientists believe that there could have been a sudden flash flood that roared through after the drought, burying its dried, shriveled body under waves of sediment and locking it in the fossil record. Without the burial, there is no fossil. As water seeped into the ground, it rehydrated the mummy, slowly filling the empty spaces of the AMNH mummy with mineralized groundwater. This is when the really cool stuff began to happen. First, microbes began nibbling away at the remaining soft tissues, like tiny recyclers breaking things down piece by piece. At the same time, minerals slipped into those newly opened spaces, settling in like grains of sand in wet cement, until little by little, the dinosaur's body hardened and turned to stone. The reason why the fine details were so well preserved was that the dinosaur's body was mummified before burial. When this happens, decomposition takes even longer to happen, meaning the details can be protected long enough for the minerals to capture them. This gives us a fossil so well preserved that we can see structures down to the microscopic level. Hadrosaurs make up a large percentage of the dinosaur mummies found today. This may be because of their large population near sandy rivers, in combination with their tough and thick skin. Speaking of hadrosaurs, meet Dakota. Dakota was discovered in North Dakota in 1999 and shows even more detail than the AMNH mummy. Along its back and tail, you can see a series of small spikes or ridges in the skin, and even the keratinous coverings of its hooves. Wow, this Dakota, it tells such a story. Because not only do we have all of this incredible skin preservation and like three-dimensionality, but we also have evidence that, there were scavengers. It was being fed upon. And yeah, I'm just looking at those claw or tooth marks, those grooves that were cut into its skin. I mean, poor Dakota. Those scavengers actually helped preserve Dakota. By poking holes in the body, they let gases and fluids escape, speeding up the mummification process. It's kind of like when you poke holes in food packaging to let air out. Except, imagine that, but with dinosaurs, teeth, and absolutely no health inspector. Alright, I guess the first thing I gotta say here is that the arms and hands on AMNH 5060 are incredible, but they kind of pale in comparison to